talking about the basics of Google Analytics. We're going to be using Google's own data, which they generously make available. This is, and by the way, if you want to play around in Google Analytics, this is Google's own merchandise stores analytics. And if you look for Google demo account, if you have a Gmail account, you have access to this. And you'll be able to play around and reproduce everything that we do today. So with that, I'm seeing a bunch of new faces, some familiar faces, my own interns, my friend Alec, and a bunch of new folks. So welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Alex Jessen. I work with some of these other guys at a social media startup called Consider, which we're launching early September. And we are investigating ways to monitor user activity.
Awesome. Very cool.
Hi, I'm Kiera. Like Christina said, I'm an intern. I'm a senior in Wisconsin. And lately I've been doing a lot of Canvas work in creating online courses.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also an intern for Christina. I just graduated with my bachelor in marketing, and I'm excited to learn more about Google Analytics. It's the best tool there is.
Alex, do you want to introduce yourself? Because you do marketing.
My name is Alec. I have a design and video firm called Warburg Creative, and we specialize in anything creative. That's about it.
He designed our logo.
Yes.
I'm James, also working at Consider here in CIC with Alex and Marcus and also Maddie. Yeah, I'm just interested in learning a bit about Google Analytics because I think we're going to want to be implementing it pretty soon in our site. So,
My name is Marcus, and I'm a web developer at Consider.
Awesome.
I'm Mary Kate. I'm a staff assistant at Harvard Extension School. I'm Maddie, and I'm interning at Consider.
Hi, Barb, and I do websites for mixed martial arts gyms.
Wow.
Do you work with Allie?
Yeah, do you work with Ali Fuller?
I do it in Florida mainly, in Adult bars.
Okay, cool. Well then, so you should definitely meet Ali Fuller. She is the founder of,
Level Ground.
what's the name?
Level
Ground. She's the founder of Level Ground MMA, and it is a nonprofit based here in Boston.
Oh, wow.
Helping youth who are at risk get themselves more focused on their life goals and personal discipline through MMA, and find careers as personal trainers in MMA.
Oh my gosh. My son's a cage fighter, so that would be good.
He should definitely volunteer. It's a great program. They've worked with a lot of youth who are like at risk of going to prison and things like that.
Yeah.
And helping them challenge their energy. So she's amazing. And she's based out of this space as well. So really wide range of professions around here. So whether you're doing higher ed, whether you're working with small businesses and gyms, or whether you're launching an app, we all want to know who our customers are. Is our marketing working? What part of our marketing is working? So there's an old saying, half my marketing doesn't work, but I just don't know what half. That is no longer the case. But one thing I do want to preface this with is that Google Analytics often gives you a lot of conflicting data. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is how to figure out what your data is really telling you. So as I said before, this is Google's own Google Analytics. Now, how many people have gotten to this screen and given up? Or gotten to the screen? Okay, about half of them. So half the folks are not comfortable or familiar with the screen, I'm taking it. Okay, so this is the audience overview, and it's both the best and the worst thing about Google Analytics. And I say it's the best because it gives you kind of a quick pulse check in terms of how much traffic you're getting. I say it's the worst because how much traffic you're getting, unless sheer traffic is your only goal in life, doesn't tell you anything. So if you're doing an awareness campaign, for instance, let's say you're doing a big enrollment drive for your adult education courses and you just want people to be aware right now that your programs exist, this might be useful. Or you're launching a new product, this is useful. But if these people don't turn into customers, it's not tremendously useful. So I want to caution you is that when you work as a web developer or you're working with clients, they often look at this screen and they get stuck here on data that's relatively meaningless because all it tells you is the sheer volume. But let's talk about what these different points mean. So you can see here that in the time frame, and this again, it's a huge amount of visitors because it's from Google between June 1st and yesterday. The Google Merchandise Store had 108,000 people visit it. It had 138,000 sessions, which means they actually got 138,430 visits, but some of those were duplicate visits. In other words, it was the same person coming back once or twice, but it's really interesting in that basically there's not that big of a gap. If you were a media company, for instance, let's say you're the New York Times, this would not be a good number because if you got 138,000 visits and 108,000 individual users, that meant that most people only came to your website in this time frame once. And if your whole revenue model is people coming back, this wouldn't be great. If, on the other hand, you're here to sell merchandise, this is fine as long as you see that people are converting. In other words, they're actually making the purchase. This is really bad news if you've got 138,000 visits, 108,000 people came by, and they didn't purchase. So this number is only meaningful when you look at your sales. New users is tricky because we've all heard that we're supposed to delete cookies from our devices, be careful to make sure marketers don't track us. Well, guess what? If you're using Google Analytics, you're the marketer tracking people. So every effort that people make to not be tracked messes with this number. Google is trying to put tracking code on people's browsers to verify that they're the same person regardless of device. Usually if they're logged into their Gmail from their phone, it'll be able to tell it's the same person. However, some people are really good at covering up their tracks, so they have a work computer that they never check their personal email on, in which case they'll seem to be two people. These are some of the more interesting pieces of information for an e-commerce site like these people are. Bounce rate. I often have clients obsess over the bounce rate. Our bounce rate is too high or too whatever, but bounce rates mean nothing if you don't know what kind of site it is. If you're a hair salon and you've got your hours of operation, the services you offer, or an auto body shop, and your phone number on your homepage, your bounce rate could be 100% and you could be fully booked out for 3 months. Because what do people want when they go to a restaurant or a hair salon or an auto body shop's website?
When they're open,
Yeah.
phone number.
Exactly. So you could have a one-page website basically, and then the bounce rate's going to be 100%. There's nowhere else to go. Maybe there's a contact us page. For e-commerce, you want the bounce rate to be as low as possible. Yes.
What is bounce rate?
Bounce rate means the number of people only visited one page and went away.
I see.
Great question. So this is how many people only visited one page and left. We had an e-commerce site that we built for a client a little while ago where their bounce rate was less than 3%. In other words, 97% of people who went to the website and saw the merchandise on the homepage stayed to shop. They didn't necessarily make a purchase, but you knew that the website itself was attracting them. Maybe the price wasn't there or they were comparison shopping, but 97% stayed to shop. And they were still concerned about those 3% of people who decided the product wasn't for them. So it's a very relative number, and you don't want to freak out if this is under 10%. You're in fantastic shape for e-commerce. Even under 20%, you're in fantastic shape for e-commerce. Because sometimes people will just go to look at a page to check it out. 47% is a bit high. It means that 53% of people stay to shop, but 47% of people just stay and they don't shop. They look at the merchandise and they go away. However, again, this is a demo account, and so it's possible people are looking at the website just to see what this is the analytics for, with no intention to shop. Session duration tells you exactly that. How many people, how long people stayed on the page and on the site. So again, this is a relative number. I often, in my class that I teach to graduate students, someone's going to say, I want to know absolutely what's a good number and what's a bad number. But it depends on the business you're in. For a hair salon to make $5 billion a year would be ridiculous. On the other hand, if you are the Pentagon, you're spending that kind of money every 2 minutes. So there's an absolute number, doesn't make sense in any kind of commerce or in any kind of economic activity, and it's the same for your website. If you're a media site, what would 2 minutes and 44 seconds tell you if you are the New Yorker or the New York Times? Would that be a number you were happy with? No. It means people don't even stop to read a whole article. On the other hand, if you were, again, the aforementioned auto body shop, that's long enough to read a phone number. So that's totally fine. Sessions per user, 1.27. That means that on average, people come back 1.25 times. Now, obviously, nobody comes back 1/4 times, because again, a lot of people never come back, and some people come back once, maybe twice. And 587,000 page views just tells you the number of pages per session. On average, these 108,000 people, half of them, remember, went away. But the 53% who stayed looked at, probably on average, because this is nearly double, probably on average actually 8 pages per session. Because if you think about it, if half the people only looked at 1, for the average number of pages per session to be 4.25, those remaining 53% had to look at a lot more than 4 pages to drag up the average. So again, the average tells you not much, but it tells you that of the people who stay, they really shop. They're looking at a lot of pages. So if you scroll a little further down, depending on the business you're in, this is either very meaningful data or totally useless data. It tells you the primary language of the people who shopped on your site or visited your site. If you're doing global business, this can be an early indicator that marketing initiatives that you've done or product rollouts you've done in other countries have worked. Or if you're marketing a higher ed program internationally, it tells you that there's interest in specific country sectors. On the other hand, if you are the auto body shop on the corner, a lot of this traffic is bots just accidentally hitting your site, or it could actually be people trying to inject malware in your site. So whether you need to pay attention is somewhat meaningless. City, on the other hand, is extremely useful, even if you're a small local business. Because let's say you're an auto body shop in Malden or Methuen, and you look at the number of visits from different cities, that can tell you what cities it would be useful to put flyers up in, advertise on the sides of buses. And if you're marketing your web design services, it'll tell you what towns potentially interested people are in. So if you get an invite from that Chamber of Commerce, it's worth it for you to drive there if people are already interested. Now, for a web designer, it's also interesting to look at mobile, because it will tell you an enormous amount of information on what kind of screens people are using. So if you're trying to fix a website for a client and they're saying, well, we want it to be mobile responsive, and you're working on it, and let's say I've seen websites where 75% of the traffic is iOS, and it's rendering strangely on an old model Samsung phone, it might be safe to ignore it if you've got 75% iOS traffic, but in this case, these folks need to optimize for everybody, except I could probably say it's safe to ignore BlackBerry. Screen resolution will also tell you a little bit about web design. So this is the main page. Also useful from a marketer standpoint is this data here, new visitor versus returning. You can see here that if they've been actively marketing themselves, this is pretty useful because most of their visitors are new folks, people who've never been on the site before. Some of this is muddied by the fact that some people have cleaned out all of their cookies in the past and they could look like a new visitor. Most people don't do that. So this is actually fairly accurate in terms of being a measure of new visitors. If you've been aggressively investing in marketing, you want to see this number go up. And oftentimes, even with clients who don't have time to pay a lot of attention to analytics, they are very excited when they see the percent of new visitors go above 25%. And again, this is pretty strong at 84%. Now again, remember, there's no such thing as an absolute value, But remember, think about the business you or your clients are in and what these numbers mean to you. So who has some questions at this point?
Is it possible to get user level data?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about that? Because we can
Um,
definitely talk about that.
Sure.
So, User Explorer. So if you see here on the left, we click on User Explorer. Now, with Google Analytics, this is going to be anonymous. There's very expensive marketing suites that are going to drop much more aggressive cookies on people's browsers, and will tell you the name of the person, especially if you have a relationship with that customer, like you've already shipped to them, they've subscribed to your email list. This is anonymous, but you can definitely see who your fans are, and you can see their trajectory through your site. Now, some of this is totally unrealistic for anybody but Google. Hands up everybody who thinks that you've got a customer who's visited your site 99 times in the past 2 months. Probably not. That may be a bot. But if you go down here, you're going to see much more realistic people. So let's see this customer here. Again, they're anonymized by client ID, and you can get a sense that this is a loyal customer. Even though their bounce rate is 90%, which means they often go to one page and leave, they've generated over the past month and 3 quarters, $1,600 worth of revenue, which is pretty decent for people buying Google merch. They've done that in only 2 transactions. And they have a goal conversion rate of 20%, and that simply means that 20% of their visits resulted in sales. They actually have a conversion rate of 100% in the sense that they have converted, they've turned into a customer. But this is divided into the number of visits. They're making a lot of visits that don't turn into sales, but 20% of the time they come to your site, they buy. So let's find out more about customer number 125358. You can see here all 87 of their sessions between June 1st and July 27th of 2017. Their date last seen was on the 14th. They tend to surf the web on their desktop computer. And they first came onto the Google's merch website October 19th, 2016. At 11:44 a.m. on July 25th, see, this is where the data sometimes gets a little messed up because you see that their date last seen is the 14th, but they actually made a purchase on the 25th. So take some of this with a grain of salt. This is less accurate than this. It flags the number of visits that fill full to gold. They spent 47 minutes on the site at 11:44 a.m. July 25th. They put 13 items in their cart. They looked at 29 pages. They spent $993. And these are things, for instance, you can set specific goals in your Google Analytics, and we'll save that for a more advanced session. You can literally specify, my goal is to get people to look at my Sign Up Now website. Or I want people to go to the page where we show a video that's a sample class. You can specify that as a goal, or you could specify you want people to look at a video for 3 minutes, and then Google will flag the visits that complete that goal. It doesn't have to just be a purchase. But you can see this person was extremely active just about lunchtime and made a significant purchase. But you can see this person keeps coming back and not making purchases. In fact, strangely enough, they've got all of these 0-minute visits, which makes me think that something's going wrong with the traffic that's coming from this person. Maybe they just keep loading the page and having some issue with their browser because you're seeing a lot of empty visits. But you can see on June 13th, they spent 13 minutes on the site, bought 27 things. So if you're in e-commerce, this can tell you, if you go in aggregate, a lot of stuff. So let's say sales are flagging, and you identify the visits that resulted in significant purchases. In other words, this person at 8 o'clock spent 13 minutes, bought 27 items. If you see people spending an abnormally large amount of time on your website before making a purchase, that can tell you things like your site's hard to navigate. Maybe it's loading very slowly. Maybe your product descriptions are so confusing that I see smiles, your site's loading very slowly, right?
More negative thoughts.
No comment. What if your product descriptions are so coy? Like your shirt is described as midnight in Morocco and not black. And people can't figure out what the heck it is you're selling without reading every single page? It could point to a ton of things, but usually if you suspect there's usability issues with your site, you've probably already got a guess of what it is. Is it slow load? Is it too many products per page so that people get confused? Is it poorly organized so that, let's say you're a hardware store and you've got, weather stripping thrown in with shingles and nobody can buy anything because they can't tell. If you see that the only time people purchase is if they're really dedicated, you want this number to be as low as possible. You want people to get out of your site fast. Unless you're selling stock and people have to do a lot of deep research or something else that's really complicated, if you're selling shirts, hardware, anything that's a quick commodity purchase, this number, if it's really high, means that people have problems with your site. And if your customer comes to you and says sales are lagging, you already have a clue. Time of day that purchases happen also tells you what's a good time of day to advertise. Has everyone heard of day parting for advertising? Okay, so day parting is when you pay to advertise only during times of day that you think your customers are active. So for instance, Americans tend to shop on their lunch breaks and at 3 in the afternoon. If you're selling an impulse buy, clothing, inexpensive home dec like coffee mugs, stuff like that, the times people make purchases are at strange hours of the weekend, like 6 a.m. or 11 p.m., lunchtime, and 3 p.m. during the workday. So let's say your email marketing person, or you are the email marketing person, is wondering, when should I send out that coupon for that flash sale on socks? 11 a.m. on a Tuesday will work because that's when people go shopping. They do it on their lunch break. And that's when you want to hit them with the coupon at the top of their inbox. It's also a good time to run your Facebook advertising. You can turn it off and on, very finely tuned, so that it hits at lunchtime, going around the world based on time zone. Takes a little doing, but if your customers shop at lunchtime, you're going to save a ton of money on window shopping visits at other times of day. Because if you see that people window shop at 8 p.m., look at all of this stuff going on at 6 a.m. that never results in a sale. If you advertise at 6 a.m., people come to your site and you only go to the first screen where it says, hey, traffic's up. Right, but if you're paying for that traffic in the form of advertising and you've spent thousands of dollars on ads to getting people to your site at 6 a.m. and that's when they don't buy anything, you've wasted those thousands of dollars and you're better off with half the traffic at lunchtime. You can also see a fair number of people as to how they get to your site to begin with. So for instance, it's going to tell you whether somebody came in first through organic search. And that's going to be in channel. So here this person's channel is direct. They had the URL for the Google Merchandise Store and they came to it. It'll also say whether they came in through organic search, and that'll tell you whether SEO is worth investing in for you. It'll tell you whether they came in from Google AdWords or social media, so you'll know that that's worth investing for you. If you're getting a ton of social media traffic, you're paying for it, and it's all of the people who don't buy, stop paying for it or change the nature of the people you target. On the other hand, if it's free social media traffic, they might buy one day. You're not really wasting your time. So think about all of this in terms of context. Look at the channel somebody came through. Look at the amount of money they've spent on your site if it's e-commerce. Think about how much money you spend on that channel, and think about whether that's worth it to you and how you're going to time it by time of day. It's really complex data, and frankly, it's one of those things that it's worth investing an hour a day over the course of several weeks to get to know your customers on this level, because it's going to tell you a lot about who they are and where you're spending your money wisely. But you can also look into your demographics. People don't even think about looking at this tab. You can see that 68% of the people who go shopping for Google Merchandise are male, 31% are female. And if you add segments, you can filter this out here by people in Boston or people who made a purchase. I would say your best bet is to go here. Everyone see what I did? I went into segments, and then I chose converters, which is people who made a purchase or took some other action that you find desirable. And if I hit apply, it takes a little while because it's filtering through a lot of data. It's going to show you the demographics of only the people who either made a purchase or signed up for the newsletter or did something to indicate that they're a customer and not just a browser. You can see the demographics change slightly, but not much. The gender breakdown hasn't changed much, although you do see that more men than women come to the site at all. But when you look at people who buy, it's overwhelmingly male. It's not just 2/3, it's now up to almost 3/4 of the people who buy Google merchandise are male. You can also see that the age skews completely differently. People who just look at the site, 28% of those are only 18 to 24. However, purchasers, only 24% are 18 to 24. The next higher age category, 25 to 34, 38% of the browsers and visitors all told in aggregate are in that age group. 42% of the people who make purchases are in that age group. So what would I do if I were marketing Google merchandise at this point in the light of this data? Bearing in mind, and here's the trick question, this is just for June and July. We haven't looked yet at other months. But what would we do? Any marketers?
So the 18 to 24-year-olds seem particularly price sensitive. So you could gear discounts towards that demographic.
Excellent. You could, what else could you do? You see that right now 18 to 24-year-olds and 35 to 44-year-olds are coming to the site not buying, but you're seeing the biggest drop of 18 to 24 and 45 to 54 of people who come to the site and don't buy. Those are the two biggest groups that visit but don't buy.
So you want to target some of your sales to those groups?
Do you want to do that? Or do you want to just give up on them because maybe it's the product itself that just doesn't appeal to them once they come to
I
your
never
site?
give up.
Okay. But there are such things as products that just don't resonate. Maybe the ad appealed to them, but once they see it, they just don't want it. This is the hardest when you're doing client work because sometimes people don't want to accept that there's people out there in the world who just won't like their product. But you have to do a couple of tests, and this is where A/B testing comes in. You can test different ads and different landing pages appealing to those age groups, and if nothing works after 5 or 6 tests, maybe the product itself is just never going to fly with them. But don't give up, I agree. At first, keep seeing if you can get through to them by testing different messages. But here's where it gets creepy, but also extremely useful. Who here is doing any kind of Facebook advertising? Okay. You might find it easier after you see the in-market segment. So I'm going under interests. And by the way, to go up a level so you can see where interests came from, I go under audience, which is this icon here, it's a little person. Then I go under interests, and then I go in-market segments. And this tells you that according to Google's own vast stores of people's shopping and behavior data, these aren't just your customers' interests. This is what's called an in-market segment, which means that they are actively in the market for these products. They've either made a purchase, they've gone to comparison shopping sites, they've looked at reviews. Something about their browser history tells you that they're actively in the market for these things. So you can see here, in some cases it's really average and nothing jumps out. So all users, about 2.76 are looking for a job, and 2.78% of the people who are going to buy a t-shirt from Google or a hat are looking for a job. It's not statistically significant, the difference versus the general population. What you're looking for in market segments is a huge difference between the behavior of a person who doesn't buy and the behavior of someone who does buy. Because that's going to tell you that there's something significantly different about those two groups And you have to figure out whether that's meaningful for your marketing. So I think we're on to something a little bit here. A significant portion of people who buy merchandise from the Google store are interested in financial services versus the group of people who don't buy. Some of this has to go to demographics. They're also in the age group where people start searching for financial services. So they're not 18 to 24. They're really at the age where people start saving for retirement. So it could mean nothing. It could just be a function of their age. But on the other hand, let's say you're selling lawnmowers and you find that a particularly large percentage of those people are interested in real estate. There's something that does seem to make sense going with each other. Maybe they're renters who are looking to buy a house and need to buy a lawnmower because their landlord's not going to be mowing their lawn anymore. Otherwise, again, I'm not seeing big giant differences here, but you are going to want to look. You also want to look at just generally the interests of the people that you really want as customers, so that you can advertise on those kinds of websites or target those kinds of people on Facebook, if in fact your products go together. So if I'm selling Google t-shirts, I'm not going to try to tie them in to used cars. Probably it's not a purchase that goes together. On the other hand, if I'm a hardware store, maybe these are just people who like to fix stuff in general, and I will target that particular segment of users with a particular product. Obviously, if you're in the higher ed market, you're going to want to look at people very closely and see how many people that you're marketing towards have shown other browsing behavior that they're in the market for education and post-secondary education. So if they're not showing that they're in market right now for education, post-secondary education, but they're coming to your higher ed website, you might be their first stop. For Harvard, that makes sense. For a big brand name university, that makes sense. If you're a smaller, more obscure institution, and you see that people are not yet in market for higher ed, but they're coming to your site, they might be alumni trying to come back. They might be people who hear about you through great word of mouth. So if you don't have huge brand awareness, this is a really good sign if people make you their first stop. And if they aren't otherwise showing browser history that they're in the higher ed market, if it's a tiny number like 1.98%, that means you are their first stop. We can also look at affinity categories, and this is broader. So we just looked at in-market, which is things people are actively shopping for. Here we're looking at broader interests. So if you're selling things like t-shirts or baseball caps, this is totally worth it to go to this particular screen. Excuse me, it's going to tell you what kind of overall interests the shoppers that you're getting have. Not surprisingly, you've got your technophiles for Google. Unsurprisingly as well, you've got mobile enthusiasts, but interestingly enough, they're all trumped by value shoppers. That was a really good point you had about how you've got a lot of people coming to the site who are younger and price sensitive, because look at what's happening. Actually, you've got bargain shoppers converting right here on this site, which means at 4%, which means that they're price sensitive and they are looking for those bargains on the site. And those are the ones who buy. So this is a ton of data, and we've only literally scratched the surface of 3 or 4 screens. We've just looked at how many visitors we have, where they come from, what their interests are, and how we look at the individual user. There's a bunch of other screens in Google Analytics, so I want to tailor this to you guys' interests here in the room as well. So you can look at acquisition. And acquisition tells you what parts of your marketing are working. We've gone through User Explorer. But there's also another screen called Behavior. And the Behavior screen is going to tell you everything from how deep people's visits are, how many pages they look at, to something called session quality. which tells you how many sessions people have with transactions or fit other goals, and compares that against how many visits it takes. So in other words, how many people who visit 2 to 5 times do a transaction, you'll see that it jumps out. The people who visit 21 to 50 times are the most likely, and 51 to 100 to do transactions. People who come only once or twice don't do transactions. And that's what it's going to tell you. There's a whole section called user flow. If you're building your own website or you're involved in usability in one way or another, this is particularly interesting. It's going to tell you how users navigate through your website, and it looks exactly like this. You can start with country, or you could get rid of this and you could simply look at what page people come to. And then it'll show you people come to the home page. A bunch of people just literally circle back to the home page, and it's a human behavior I've always been mystified by. The number of people who navigate a website by going to a page, going back to home. Going to a page, going back to home. Fair number of people do that, but if you see that as an abnormally high number, something's very wrong with your navigation. Maybe there's certain buttons people can only find easily on home, in which case your top and side navigation really needs some serious work. But otherwise, it will tell you which pages are most appealing to people based on what they have just seen before. So maybe most people go to home and then they go to redesign apparel. Then they search. If people's third most popular stop is search, you either have a humongous site or you have extremely poor architecture. My bet is if it's e-commerce that there's improvements that can be made in the architecture unless there's thousands of products. If you're going to Amazon, your first thing is going to be search because you're never going to find everything. If you're dealing with somebody who's got 6 categories of products and at most 500 SKUs, in other words 500 products, and people are just searching it, it means that somehow the way you've structured your site is not meeting their needs because they can't intuitively navigate and they've given up and they're going straight to search for way too few items for that to be a reasonable behavior. So this user flow, there's a whole science to looking at user flow. I'm not going to belabor the point right now because it's pretty advanced, but it's something you should be aware of. But I do want to do a quick look at your acquisitions overview because from a marketing standpoint, that's one of the most important things. So if you look at this tab here, this is the button for acquisition. It's going to tell you where people are coming from to find your site, and it's going to compare just the general population of people finding your site versus people who purchase. And you're looking for differences in data. You can see here that 54% of people who just come to the site at all just Googled for the Google store. Sounds very meta. On the other hand, only 37% of the people who bought something Googled for the Google store. Most people seem to need to have the site bookmarked or have a referral. This is the biggest number for referrals I've seen in e-commerce for a long time. Who can tell me what is meant by referral or give it an educated guess? It's a link on somebody else's site to your site. So a blogger talked about it, or you were listed in a directory or online or something. So if 36.9, so nearly 37% of people who bought something came to the site from a link on some other site, it means that endorsements matter a lot for getting that purchase, at least in this field. You'll find that in some products, it really matters if bloggers are talking about you. So if you're thinking about how to allocate your marketing budget and you're wondering, should I invest more in SEO or should I invest more in reaching out to Instagrammers? What would you do based on this data? Yes, exactly. Because it's the referrals, it's the links from people that matter a lot. Somebody's blog, somebody's website, that's where it's coming from. Direct, 14% and 16% versus between converters and all users is pretty statistically close. These are people who already have the site bookmarked, and everything else is pretty small. You can see in some industries, paid search would often be the biggest one. Those are your Google AdWords lead to purchases. This is the sliver of social media. And this tiny, tiny sliver here, even smaller here, pretty small here, are display advertising. You're pretty well advised that from an awareness standpoint, display advertising might be worth it, but in terms of generating sales, it's clearly not doing it for the Google Merchandise Store, because only 210 people in the past 2 months who saw a display ad anywhere made a purchase. So if you're thinking about figuring out what part of your marketing works, this is easily the best place to go, but you don't want to stop there. You want to look at the dollar value of purchases made on different channels. Because let's say you are getting very little traffic from organic search, but the people who do come in through organic search are the ones who make the biggest purchases. Then SEO is actually still worth it to you because you're getting good dollar revenue. At the end of the day, all of these metrics come down to dollar revenue. Where are you spending the least amount to make the most? That's what you're looking at, and how can you tweak it? How can you spend less and make more by optimizing your different purchases? Now, we've gone through so much, and we've only, like I said, maybe looked at a couple of the features available in Google Analytics. It's a really powerful tool, so I want everybody to promise each other that you're going to go into this demo account and just start learning to get comfortable with these numbers. This is 1/10 of what you can learn. All of this data comes down to, though, is setting up your goals. So one thing you want to do when you get home is in your own analytics, think about what your goals are, because you have to tell Google what your goals are. Do you want people to complete an e-commerce transaction? Hands up how many people need an e-commerce transaction to be completed. Okay. How about filling out a contact me form or a contact us for more information form? Okay. What are some of the other goals you could have for your website? What do you want people to do?
Spend time on the site and come back to it.
Okay. How much time? You have to give Google a number.
All of it.
Yeah.
All day. So you are not happy unless you get an 8-hour visit to your website.
I wouldn't say that we're not happy, but we would be pretty happy if someone was not sleeping. It's just
Okay, so let's get something more realistic so that these gentlemen stay in business.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
15 minutes.
How complicated is your product?
Right now, too complicated.
Because if it takes 20 minutes for someone to go to your site,
Yeah.
your first step is make your product something people can grasp in less than 10 minutes.
So it's not something people are buying. It's like it's kind of like New York Times in the sense.
Okay, so it's a media site.
It's like
Okay, it's content. Okay, how long is the average read of one article? How long does it take?
Quite short.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so how many minutes?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So what happens in 20 minutes with 30-second articles?
They're generating content.
They're generating, okay, so now we're getting closer to a real goal.
So they're more engaged users if
Okay.
they're spending 20 minutes.
So you want people to generate content. Okay, so that's not a site visit goal necessarily. Presumably they click some kind of button to generate content, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do you know there's like, how fast can you generate content? Is it a universal number?
No.
It varies.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like the goal you're actually aiming for is content. So there's some page people go to generate content. You guys are web developers, you're smart. What page do people hit when they've successfully generated content? Do they get a thank you? Is it some JavaScript that's running?
Like submit.
Yes.
Effectively.
No!
Yeah.
Yes! So that's your goal. You can tell Google Analytics that your goal is for people to hit the content submit button. Google's not smart enough to tell whether they wrote total nonsense that you can't publish or whether it's useful, but you've hit the answer. It could take them 10 seconds because they've written it in Google Docs and they're just copying and pasting it over. That's actually the kind of user you want, somebody who proofread it. So in this case, unless you want poorly spelled articles so you can make fun of them later, that's a possibility. However, you want people to submit content. You're going to hit that as your goal. And you can then see how many people completed the goal. You can sit a lot of goals in here. You can fit tons of them. So for instance, some people only entered checkout, that's a goal. Engaged users, that's goal number 2. That's people who looked at a certain number of pages. You can see that you're looking at reduction in abandonment rate. In other words, people who filled up a shopping cart and abandoned it. By the way, who can tell me the average e-commerce site's shopping cart abandonment rate? Free ticket to the next event for the person who comes closest.
80%.
Okay, any other guesses?
65.
Okay,
40.
okay,
90.
okay. Well, you can't win a free ticket, but do you have a guess?
91.
You have a group guess, okay. No, okay. You have a guess, I can tell. No? All right, any other guesses?
Was it 70?
Bingo, 74%. You win. The average shopping cart abandonment rate is 74%. So Google's doing pretty well. So you can, like I said, set as many goals as you need. Maybe hit the submit button is one thing, but also maybe, what are some other goals that they could have? Because they clearly have no sense of their own goals, so we need to give them some. What else can a media site achieve? What would make sense?
I mean, I don't know if it would apply to us, but like subscriptions.
Yes, subscriptions, signs up for the newsletter, social media shares. Time on site is a sub-goal. You can certainly put it in there. I mean, if you're playing around with it, it's fine. Page views. Page views are really good. Depth of visit, for instance, let's say one goal is more than 5, another goal is more than 10. Certain number of social media shares per visitor. Put in as many as you want. Make sure though, because so much of the Google Analytics data will just tell you all converters and it won't make the distinction between people who contribute content or subscribe versus someone who just looks at a bunch of pages and never comes back. Make sure that most of the goals, if you have them all aggregated, like here, that that's still going to be meaningful data. Don't throw a lot of junk goals in there, like sometimes time on site's a junk goal, sometimes it's realistic, sometimes page views are a junk goal, but don't throw them in here because it's going to mess up your data and you're going to go in one day and you're going to say, I have a great conversion rate, oh my gosh, except that 70% of those conversions were people looking at more than 2 pages. On the other hand, if you have a client who's just breathing down your neck and saying, I want a bunch of people to look at my page, I don't care if they buy, then it isn't a junk goal, then it's legit. But if you look at these particular numbers, it's a huge start. Your numbers are your numbers. You can think about goal flow, pages people visit before submitting content. Maybe one particular article is the one that gets people to submit content the most. Either it's the shortest or it's the one that most people can relate to. Think about what triggers that conversion. What did people do right before going to convert? Did they look at a coupon? Did they look at a specific call to action? That's going to be in your goals flow. And you can also look at, finally, your multi-channel funnels, which means we all know that sometimes we have to see something 5 or 6 times before taking action. So if you go under multi-channel funnels, and then you go into overview, you can see what the assists are. So in other words, you can look at how many people were exposed to more than one channel before making conversion. So in other words, it looks like one of the biggest overlaps are between direct and referral. 23.73, so almost 24% of the purchases made were people who saw an endorsement or a link to the Google merchandise store on somebody's blog and then came back another time by just typing in the URL. They didn't go back to the blog, they didn't go to organic search, they cared enough to bookmark it, and then they came in. You're also seeing a fair number of people who found it first through organic search, about 8.5%, and then came back through direct. But then you can see, and you won't underestimate the impact of some of your marketing channels, that maybe they're not leading to the purchase on the first visit, but they contributed to a relationship with that customer that led to a purchase. It's especially important in higher ed because a lot of times it takes people a long time to decide to go back to school at all, let alone what school, so they might need to see the bus ad. Put up a special URL for the bus ad so you can track it, then they'll come to you through a paid ad, then through a Facebook post, and it might be the 8th visit before they even fill out the form to get some additional information. So always look at your multi-channel conversion visualizer for that reason. So we're still only at about 11% of what Google Analytics can do. Again, play around with it, but I'm definitely going to leave some time now for questions because there's probably a lot of them in your head, or you are just now totally overwhelmed and itching to run out the door and try your Google Analytics.